could kill me right now and I would be permanently dead. And I would willingly do that if it would end world hunger and poverty. That is a sacrifice. Saying, I'm going to let some people beat me and torture me and in a day and a half, I'm going to rise up and become what I was before. I was God before, I'm God after. That's not a sacrifice. That's a bad weekend.
Well, in your opinion.
Okay.
The truth.
What was this? What was the sacrifice? If you begin with $100 million and you end with $100 million, but you set the $100 million aside for 2.5 days, what did you sacrifice?
That's way beyond this, way beyond money.
Yeah, it's way beyond it because this is actually real and the Jesus story isn't.
This is frustrating. I get that this atheist doesn't believe Christianity. Fine. But this response demonstrates that he is not even trying to understand it. Here are two things to consider when responding to this challenge. First, this atheist just ignores the incarnation. Think about this. The king of the universe left his throne, enters into human history, lived a perfect life of obedience, and then willingly went to the cross on our behalf. Philippians 2 puts it this way: though he was in the form of God, he did not count equality with God a thing to be grasped, but emptied himself by taking the form of a servant, being born in the likeness of men, and being found in human form, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. Let that sink in. The king became a servant. The creator becomes part of his creation. Jesus wasn't pretending to be human. He was truly human, experiencing life with all of its struggles and pains and limitations. My point is, Jesus' sacrifice didn't begin at the cross. It began with the incarnation, when he set aside his divine privileges and walked among us. Second, this atheist downplays Jesus' suffering and sacrifice. Notice how he treats Jesus' suffering like a minor weekend inconvenience, as if he had just a rough couple of days and then bounced right back. But since when do we measure suffering and sacrifice? Merely by its duration. Jesus was betrayed, abandoned, falsely accused, flogged, humiliated, and then killed on a cross, an excruciating execution. Yeah, but he came back to life. So what? Does that erase the suffering and sacrifice? The money analogy only underscores that this atheist has no idea what he's talking about. He says, if you begin with $100 million and you end with $100 million, but you set aside the $100 million for 2.5 days, what did you sacrifice? This completely misses the point. Suffering and sacrifice aren't merely measured by permanent loss. It's about what is endured. Let's put this in perspective with a different analogy. Imagine a little girl is kidnapped. To save her, her mother offers her own life in exchange. The kidnappers accept the trade. They take the mother, hold her captive, and subject her to horrific physical, emotional, and sexual abuse for an entire weekend. Then, for whatever reason, they decide to let her go. Now imagine someone saying, since she began with her freedom and ended with her freedom, but only set aside her freedom for 2.5 days, she never really made a sacrifice. See how ridiculous that sounds? This wasn't like misplacing your wallet for the weekend. It was the brutal murder of an innocent man who willingly took the punishment that we deserved. Yes, he came back to life, but that doesn't somehow negate his suffering and sacrifice. In fact, while Jesus' death paid for our sins, it's his resurrection that makes him our high priest before the Father, so that we can be joined to him and raised with him. This atheist argument may sound catchy and play well to his base, but it completely fails to understand the weight of Jesus' sacrifice. This wasn't a minor inconvenience. This was the greatest act of love in human history.